We're so happy that you are here. While we get all settled in for the night, I would love if you guys could put your drop in the chat where you're from and how you connect with science education. Are you a teacher? Are you a professor? What are you doing in the world of science education? Drop that in as you are getting settled here. Let's see where everyone is from. I know I saw Seattle earlier. Montgomery County, Maryland. Elizabeth, we're in the same county. Jacqueline from Illinois, you teach STEM. Sharon's here. Who else do we have? Tennessee 4-H, amazing. Rutherford County, Tennessee. Wisconsin, Redding, California. Education Outreach, West Georgia. We have high school chemistry, biology, environmental science. Ohio, Kentucky. Amazing. Happy that you all are here. We are going to get started into our workshop today, which is entitled NGSS in Action, Examples Straight from the Classroom. Before we begin, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Nerswick. I spent a decade in high school classrooms across the Eastern Seaboard, and today I spend my time in the world of NGSS, specifically creating unit development. And to get started, before we get into answering the question of like, how does NGSS show up in the real classroom? We have some norms for our workshop, just like you would have rules in your classroom. Make sure that you're muted throughout the workshop. There will be a microphone icon that pops up periodically, and that's your cue to be like, I can talk, I can share my voice here in the workshop. We'll also be using the chat throughout, as you guys have already used in the meeting chat, sharing your reasons where you're from. My colleague Angela and I will be monitoring the chat throughout the whole workshop to make sure that we are hearing your questions and we are seeing what's going on. We also have some breakout rooms coming up later in tonight. I just want you to treat it like you would if it was your students. You would expect your students to be collaborative, engaged, and kind, and we ask you to do the same. Finally, in the chat in just a second, Angela is going to drop a takeaway document. This takeaway document is going to look a little bit like this. It's going to force a copy for you on Google, where you have one place for all of your links for tonight's workshop. You can use the QR code or you can grab it from the chat. We'll be referencing that takeaway document throughout the workshop tonight, and it's going to be a great resource for you tomorrow when you hop into your classroom and you're like, oh, what did I learn last night? This will help you. And yes, we'll drop those individual links as they pop up, but this is a great summary resource for you. So take a second to grab those and we will get going. Perfect. All right. Well, let's get into the chat one more time. I would love to hear why you guys decided to come to this webinar tonight. Were you at the first one? What made you come to the second one? Or how'd you hear about this second one? And what do you want to walk away with tonight? All right. What made you come? We got some agriculture teachers here. We have science educators, ag in the classroom. We have camps. Teach AP Human Geography. Yes. Perfect. At the first one, awesome. Welcome back. Great. Guide our team in creating more relevant content and real-world connections, sharing you are in the right place. We're going to be talking about a lot in the end. Live and work in a rural area, and we ignore the fact that we are all involved in ag. Well, I'm happy you guys are here. Our goal is for you to walk away with confidence in selecting teaching practices that drive sense making using agriculture phenomena that are appropriate for where you guys show up every day, elementary, middle, and high school levels. We also hope that you can walk away by utilizing some agriculture topics in science classrooms that can promote student engagement. And we're going to start that by just briefly talking about sense making before we get into our guest speakers for tonight. If you were at workshop number 1, NGSS and me, you might remember about sense making. We talked about it for a little bit, but if you didn't attend or you don't know a little bit about sense making, we'll review it a little bit tonight, but you can also go back and watch that recording from workshop 1 later. But just to wet our whistles, we're going to say, talk about sense making by listening to this quote. Sense making is when students as scientists have authentic, relevant opportunities to actively make sense in the world and beyond. And that's what we call sense making. Science learning becomes engaging, accessible, and important to all students. Sense making is truly the cornerstone of NGSS, and all of the real classroom examples that we have for you tonight keep sense making as the main focus. And if you were at our last workshop, you probably heard and remember the 3 dimensions of NGSS. I want you to type a 1 in the chat if you feel confident you understand the 3 dimensions of NGSS. Type a 2 if you're feeling like a little unsure. I'm just like not 100% on that. So a 1, I'm feeling good, I love them, or like 2, I'm still trying to figure it out. Okay, looks like we have a little bit more 2s than 1s, but that's okay. We have a mixed crowd here. Awesome. Yeah, it looks almost 50-50. And that's great. Regardless of if you're voted that you're unsure or you're confident, here's a quick review and a great image that helps demonstrate what NGSS, those 3 dimensions are. So number 1, we have science and engineering practices. That's the blue people in this image. And science and engineering practices, or what we call SEPs, are describing what students are doing as they're engaging in the science content. So are they analyzing data? Are they creating models? Are they asking questions? Are they creating arguments? What are they doing to engage and perform and show how they're engaging with that content and making sense of that content? A disciplinary core idea, a DCI, is what students know. So if you think of this puzzle piece, at the end, once all the puzzle pieces are put together, it's a beautiful picture. And the goal in science education is that picture would be about a science content area. Ecosystems, it would be about, human impact on the environment. It would be about genetics, and the students would be able to make sense of that content through the DCIs. And last, we have the cross-cutting concepts, the CCCs. These are how students think. And if you notice, those CCCs are on the inside of those puzzle pieces. So regardless what's on the front, regardless of the content that you are engaging in science education, you are going to be using those cross-cutting concepts throughout any science education, looking at patterns, looking at cause and effect. You could relate both of those things to ecosystems, to humans' impact on the environment, or even genetics. And that is how they cross-cut and they come together throughout all science education. And these 3 dimensions work together to get our students to a place where they can demonstrate their learning with performance expectations. Like this demonstrates in this visual. Performance expectations define what students should be able to do after instruction. Additionally, they help students and teachers understand how to act as scientists within a specific science domain. So as you can see with this picture, when all 3 of those dimensions come together, they create a more solid, stronger rope, stronger connection, so the students can be tested through assessment. And you might be thinking, like, I'm not sure how to come up with a good performance expectation that aligns with the 3 dimensions. Good news, there is a search tool that allows you to search topics, to combine topics, to click topics to find a performance expectation that would fit well with what you're trying to teach. The link is in your takeaway document, and Angela has dropped it for you. So now that we had a little refresher, let's get into hearing from real teachers just like you who have used different types of assessments in their classroom about NGSS. And we're going to start off with a starter toolkit. A starter toolkit is a document that describes agriculturally related phenomena and problems that could serve as drivers for science or agriculture instruction. And it's usually done in these three ways. First, it could be used as an anchor to drive more robust instructional units or lessons. It could be used as an investigative phenomena that helps support like a larger phenomena. Maybe it's a smaller piece, one lesson instead of a whole unit. Or it could be the focus of a transfer task. We'll talk about transfer tasks a little bit later tonight. We're going to use the example from the Washington Soil Starter Kit. It was particularly made for middle school science for making sense of ecosystems. And we are so lucky to have a teacher who did this with her class this year and is willing to share her experience. I'm happy to introduce our first speaker of the night, Miss Cassidy McAllister. Cassidy is a fourth-year teacher and has taught both science and agriculture classes in middle and high school levels. She loves watching students have light bulb moments when they find their passion and learn something new. Outside of the classroom, she enjoys spending time with her 6-month-old son, her husband, and her dog. All right, Cassidy, you can take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. So this toolkit I was able to use, and what I want to start off by saying is that I am from Kentucky. So I really used this and transferred some of the things that I saw in there from Washington to Kentucky when I used it, but I am also going to discuss it in terms of Washington, which is how the toolkit was created and who it was designed for. But tonight, basically, this toolkit, it's a document that is going to describe agriculture-related phenomena and how they can drive instruction. Now, I use this in my science classes, but it was a really great segue from things that I know and love about agriculture to science. And again, like Sarah said, it can be used in several ways, one of three ways: explaining phenomena, solving problems that support student learning, and showcasing that connection to NGSS standards. Then also we were able to incorporate elements of the pillars of ag literacy, so we know that it has some foundations in agriculture. And then finally, we connect it to NGSS by using that 5E learning model. So tonight, what we're going to do is before we really dive into it, we need to know, number one, what is it? And then we're going to need to know, how do I use it? So to start off, what is this? When we take a little bit of a closer look, there are 5 main things that we're going to look at. Learning targets is going to be our very first one. We're going to connect it to our phenomena, look at essential questions, the activity, and the resources. With learning targets, we know that learning targets have been around for a really long time, and we know that they are goals that we set up for our students, and we provide measurable, actionable statements. So for example, you're going to see when using this toolkit that they actually use an NGSS format with that 3D language. So for example, one of the ones that I used was focusing on a standard that talks about human impacts on Earth systems, and our learning target was using existing knowledge about state geography and reading maps, as well as their existing knowledge of ecosystems, natural resources, and other systems. Students are going to analyze the maps and ask questions in order to construct an explanation about the patterns that they see. Then from there, we're actually able to go ahead and connect it to our phenomena. And what we're going to see here is that these phenomena, like the one that I used, was a part of the soil survey maps, and I look specifically at our school. What do you see here? And what I'm trying to do is I want to encourage my students to say, I wonder, or they're going to access previous knowledge that they've learned before, whether it was with me or another grade level. We're also encouraging them to make connections and guide their own learning to that ultimate learning target that we have for them. And then it also, finally, it allows you to have think time and discussion time for your students by using this phenomenon. Then with our essential questions, they actually provide several essential questions for you. And these are going to be our teacher-led questions that help guide your students towards that learning target, getting to be successful in that learning target. And that's going to be in a question-based format. So for example, if I were using these 2 maps for my activities, one of them is based on the soil the topography of Kentucky, and the other one is based on production of agriculture products. And so I might ask questions such as, what patterns do we see among topography and soil series in Washington? I used Kentucky, and agriculture production. Or I might ask them, what are the relationships between these two things that we see, and how can we connect them? Then from there, we're able to move on to that activity where we're specifically looking at these two maps, and we are focusing on those patterns that we see in the maps, and how can we get them to analyze the maps and then eventually construct explanations. And then one thing that I also love about using this toolkit is that they provide resources for you. So as a teacher, when you get to resources, you're going to see that you have different tools that are provided for you that you as the teacher can explore, so that you're not just completely going at it completely in the dark. So you might ask, have questions that your students are asking, and you can provide or look at these resources, or even provide these resources to help answer those questions for your students. But then you can also use it to help with differentiation. So for example, if you have a student who is excelling and really understands these, the analyzing the maps and making those connections, then you might even use the web soil survey and look at a specific area in your county and have them make connections that way. What do we know about the agriculture that we're in and the products we're producing? And then how do we connect this with the soil that we know we have here in Callaway County? Then from there, we're going to look at, how do I use it? And this toolkit is really great because it's using that 5E model. So we're going to look at engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. When we start looking at the engage aspect of this, we're going to be looking specifically at those topography maps. And again, there are lots of different resources that are already provided for you. So you're able to pull up a map such as this one and look for those patterns. You're asking students to look at soil types. What do you know about cattle nutrition? What do you know about ag production? And you're going to have various maps in there that allow them to look for patterns between those three things. Then from there, you get to explore with your students, and you're wanting to have them connect to that deeper learning. So they're connecting that phenomena, and then you're going to provide opportunities for them to explore more. And they are learning about management strategies that are related to soil health and ecosystems. So you're guiding them in this learning in this portion of the toolkit. So if I look at this Washington map, I'm looking at the topography, and again, I'm looking at the production of products in Washington. Then from there, once the students have learned a little bit more and you've guided them to where they need to be, they are going to actually explain it and practice explaining this themselves. So there are 3 activities in this toolkit where they are explaining what they've learned. And you'll notice that they use that 3D language here in the activities that they've created. So if we're investigating and comparing, then we're going to use soil candy bars in the activity that they've set up there to compare, what does this soil actually look like, and how can I use it with candy bars, or how can I connect it with candy bars? Then with the Legos, you're actually going to have students make a model of an ecosystem. And then finally, the third activity that you could use is the food webs, which is actually the one that my students have used. And they're demonstrating those patterns. How can I connect this animal to this animal, or this type of production, this apples to this, or these animals to these producers. Then finally, the fourth thing that we're going to do is we're going to elaborate. So from here, your students are actually going to continue on what they've learned. They're building on what they've learned in those first 3 E's, and they're going to actually apply this to a new scenario based on that prior knowledge that they have from those first 3 E's. So they are going to, in this specific one that they've laid out in the Washington toolkit, is where you are assigning groups of students, or each individual student, a soil kit, or not a soil kit, sorry, a soil example, a profile. And you want to know, based on what you know about soil types and the production that we have seen in Washington, what do you think would happen, or what do you think would grow in this area? What would be the best production? And so you'll have all kinds of different soil types that are out there, and students can actually apply what they've learned and make predictions, which is a really awesome thing for students to be able to do. Then last but not least, this is the time when you are evaluating your students. So they're going to be explaining those relationships between things that they have already talked about and already learned about. And they are going to be using evidence and previous knowledge. And so if I want to go back to that 3D learning target that I was just talking about, it's talking about analyzing the maps, asking questions, constructing explanations about those patterns. So some of the questions they might ask are, what is soil health? So they are constructing explanations, and then they would continue with those guided evaluations from there. So overall, this has been a really great toolkit, and I think that looking at what it is and how I've used it has allowed me to be really successful. And of course, using the NGSS standards and things, and that 5E model was really, really helpful in providing this experience for my students.
Thank you, Cassidy. Give her a virtual round of applause. Thank you for sharing. It's really cool to see how you took, the resource that Washington State provides for anybody to look at, and how you adapted it for your students, and were able to make it get them connected to Kentucky and be able to learn about both of those. Angela is going to share out some questions that we had from the chat, and we'll just take a few minutes for Cassidy to answer those.
Yeah, so Cassidy, we had one question in the chat about the time frame for completing this activity. If you could maybe just share a little bit about the breakdown of how you would organize all of those E's in your class.
Absolutely. Sorry. So I have, we are on a block schedule. So I have 90-minute classes, and we are on A-B schedule. So I see my students every other day. And then from there, so I'll see them 3 days one week and 2 days the next week. And what this looked like in my classroom is that I really wasn't able to get to every single thing that I wanted to, because things happen, right? But overall, this took probably about 2 weeks, or those 5 class periods, to go through most of the things that I wanted to get to. But again, with that 90-minute class period, we were able to actually do more than one thing at a time. So where some classes might be 50 minutes, they might get through one activity where they were looking at investigating and comparing using the soil candy bars. But for me, I was able to get through the phenomena and still be able to go into the explore with my students, where we were looking at the things that I was providing for them. So overall, probably about 2 weeks, or for me, about 5 class periods.
Great. Another question is, where do you get some of these soil maps and the different production maps that you got for your state? Are they available on a specific website, or how much digging did you have to do for those?
So, well, I personally am a big tech person, and I actually took the pictures from Washington and put them into Google, and they were actually able to find similar things for me, because you can Google pictures now, using pictures now. And I think that's fascinating. So for me, it was a lot easier. For example, the topography map, that one's pretty simple. I can just look on, our Kentucky website and NRCS or something like that, and look for that. But the production map, I know that this was created for Washington. I'm looking for something simple. And I used Google to help me find that production map for Kentucky.
Another question, what part of the E's, so of the 5 E's, what do you think was the most challenging to implement? Or maybe alternatively, what was kind of the easiest? Where did you see the biggest student light bulbs?
So I think honestly, because I have a background in agriculture, this was a little bit easier for me. The Explorer was pretty simple to initiate, at least in terms of like, what can I provide my students, because I know they don't know X, Y, and Z. So that's where I know what my students know, and I know what they don't know, and I'm able to provide, well, they don't know much about cattle nutrition. Let's explore that together. I do know that they know what a topography map looks like, so we don't have to worry about that as much. So for me, knowing my students, where they come from, and what kind of resources are available for me to help my students get the knowledge they need was fairly easy. But I will say that sometimes the elaborate portion, where they're predicting outcomes based on a scenario, can be challenging for students. And sometimes that's because of the culture of the classroom, where you have students that just aren't willing to put themselves out there. And sometimes it's because the students haven't been working on those skills to make those predictions, make those connections. And that's something that you really have to work on from the beginning, or work on building those skills so the students are successful in that.
You've got another one that came through. Was it hard for you to modify this for your state and also for your individual class? And then how much time did that take in terms of being able to plan and have things ready to execute in the classroom?
I would say that in terms of modifying, like, I found it fairly easy, but I know that Kentucky has some pretty great resources that allow me to modify this. So I was able to find those topography maps and the production maps really easy. And then from there, I just was able to look at the web soil survey and some of those things that allowed me to connect, what do my students need to connect directly to the area that we live in. And I've used that before, so that helped a little bit. But in terms of time, I would say that the most time consuming portion was just making sure that I was able to use the parts that I wanted to, and modifying, and of course I'm going to make mistakes. So there were parts where I still had Washington left in there, and I was like, oh guys, that's for Kentucky. I use this, no big deal, just scratch that out or delete it and put in Kentucky. And so I'd say it probably took me a planning period to go through and make sure that what was there and what was provided was usable and that I could change it. So that's, a planning period, or maybe a little bit more once we get into the content and see if there's anything I need to add or to adjust and modify once we've already started. But overall, it wasn't too bad.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassidy. We appreciate your expertise and taking your knowledge and sharing it with us. Remember that Washington soil starter kit is on your toolkit, is in your takeaway document that you got earlier. I'll have Angela drop that in the chat if you came a little later. We are going to move on to transfer tasks. It's our next example. We're gonna chat about transfer tasks. Drop a 1 in the chat if you've ever heard of a transfer task before. Just see if anybody's heard of it before I get into it. Nope. 2s. Yeah, 2 if you haven't, 1 if you have. So far, no's. Oh, no's. Good. That good news, because you're going to learn about it tonight. A transfer task refers to a summative assessment, which your students must transfer the knowledge gained in your unit, an authentic learning unit, to a new situation, okay? A new situation in a performance-based task. This assessment can use to evaluate the quality of the phenomena that they taught through, and it basically makes them figure out, like, did they actually get the 3 dimensions of learning? Because that's what you're trying to do. You're getting the 3 dimensions of learning. Can they transfer that to something else in science and make sense of it? And we are going to look at a transfer task assignment that was made for middle school, specifically for biology, ecology. I know I saw those subjects come through at the beginning, and we're lucky to have an experienced NGSS educator to share with us tonight. Happy to introduce our second speaker. This is Angela Galata. Angela has 17 years of teaching experience in middle and high school across Illinois and Wisconsin. She taught physics, engineering, biology, and general science for countless students, and she loves being able to share her passion for science and make learning exciting and engaging for everyone in the classroom. And nowadays she spends time as a learning analyst, putting her skills to use, making new cutting edge NGSS resources for y'all. So we are going to get going in 1 second. Make sure you can take it away, Angela. I'm just going to get your video ready for you.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everybody for coming. The soil transfer task comes out of work that was done with the State Beef Council in Washington. So it's one that focuses on the SEPs of developing models and constructing the explanations that support them. It explores the cross-cutting concepts of cause and effect, and it uses patterns to explain the relationships of ecosystem impacts and human resources. In your classroom, when using this transfer task, you would start with the video that we're about to watch. Students would have the prompts on the transfer task worksheet and complete those to demonstrate their understanding about how the role that humans play in soil and related ecosystems. So now I would like for you to engage as you would expect one of your students to as we watch the video in this transfer task. Maybe.
Hey folks, my name's Ashley Minerath. I'm the site director here at Cascadian Farm Home Farm in beautiful Skagit Valley, Washington. Today we're going to look at a rainfall simulator demonstration. So I gathered 3 soil samples from around the farm. Here we have our native soil from the forest land surrounding the farm. This has been undisturbed for decades. In the middle, we have a sample from between our blueberry alleyways. So this is filled with grass and clover and has been undisturbed for about 2 decades. This third sample has been taken from our annual crop fields, and this has been tilled regularly every year. As you can see, we just have a few plants in here. So let's see what happens during a rainfall simulation. Watch what happens to the soil, the water infiltration, and the runoff during this event.
Each soil sample has 2 buckets capturing water. The bucket in the front of each sample measures runoff. This is water that cannot be absorbed by the soil and quickly runs off, taking valuable topsoil and excess nutrients with it, leading to pollution in nearby lakes, streams, rivers, and other farms. The bucket underneath the sample measures water infiltration. This is the soil's ability to retain and hold moisture that can be used by plants and roots over time, so the water stays on the farm, right where it's needed. Notice the runoff from the spare soil sample. The soil had very little armor and living roots to protect it. The rainwater hit the soil with such velocity it created a compacted layer and sealed the surface. The bottom of the sample is bone dry. Virtually none of the water was able to infiltrate. The sample from the blueberry field had armor to protect it. Most of the water ran off, but it didn't take the soil with it. Both of these soils suffer from compaction. The sample from the native forest was able to infiltrate all of the rainwater. The soil had a protective armor from the living plants and decomposing organic matter. This soil hasn't been compacted by equipment or tillage. It's rich and dark and easily crumbles. The open space between the aggregates allow air, water, and nutrients to move through the soil, feeding a diverse ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and microorganisms. Thanks for watching the video today. If you'd like to learn more about how General Mills is working towards a regenerative future, visit us at the website below.
All right, so now that you've watched that video, now it's time to practice this transfer task by putting on your student hat. So please note that we are only doing a few of the prompts from the activity that's on the center website, and we're just doing that in the interest of time. But we will provide a link to the complete resource in the chat. So let's get started. Now with our new knowledge that we just acquired from the video, your challenge is to construct a model and explanation for predictions about cause and effect patterns, including those of stability and change that impact ecosystems and human resources. Was that an NGSS aligned 3-dimensional learning objective that you're here going to be completing? It sure is. So this task is on your takeaway document, and we're going to drop the link in the chat again for you. So before we get into your activity directions, please make sure that you have access to the PDF that's titled Use for Breakout Group Transfer Task Worksheet. You'll definitely want to have that pulled up as you head into your breakout rooms. Just giving you a moment to pull it up. Okay, so in just a moment, you're going to be sent to a breakout room to complete this activity in a small group. There are 3 scenarios from prompt C to apply your new knowledge to. Once you have selected a scenario, you will collaborate to complete prompt C. Using drawing tools, you can use pen and paper, you can just have some discussion about what might show up on your student notepad there, and your group will develop and draw that model that explains what impacts humans can have on soil and ecosystems. The last thing you'll do is you'll write a short explanation in prompt D for the model that you created that's going to make those predictions about how changes are going to impact availability of resources to humans. So again, student hats, we're ready to go. We're going to give you some time in breakout rooms. Be ready to share and discuss those models and those explanations with a large group when you return. So what questions can I answer before we get started? Unrelated to like overall task, just in terms of directions that I gave you there. We'll answer all of those other ones at the end there. All right. So again, prompt C, pick one of those scenarios, think through that video that we just watched, draw out your model, and then create your explanation for prompt D. All right, we'll go ahead and put you into those breakout rooms, and Sarah, I can handle that here.
Yep. And if you end up getting into a breakout room where people are off camera or people aren't communicating, don't worry, you can do it all on your own. You can individually go through it. That is totally okay. I hope, and crossing my fingers that you guys will participate and join together, because it's better when we work together. But if that happens in your group, don't worry, just go on about your task on your own.
We're going to give you 10 minutes and I'll also push out a little reminder for you. So hopefully that's enough time to be able to get to know one another, collaborate, and everything that's involved in completing the task. So we will see you in a little bit.
With relevant topics for your required science standards. That means you'll be able to capture students' attention while staying aligned with your responsibilities that your state or your county tells you need to teach. But the kids are going to be excited because it's something that relates to their life. Like rain happens, right? Rain happens. Soil is under our feet all the time. So being able to bring that to their attention. Agricultural literacy helps build foundational understanding of the relationship between agriculture, the environment, food, fiber, energy, animals, lifestyle, the economy, technology. It's all connected. Being able to make curriculum engaging and relevant to your students is important to you. I would expect you being here, that's the answer. It is important to you. Agricultural literacy also provides a great place to remember that science is relying on other areas of other disciplines like math, English language arts, computer science, career readiness, 21st century innovation, systems thinking, and so many others. And it's a great place to get started. Using these agriculture ideas and concepts can help drive learning to increase student motivation and help them connect to the real world. And if you've been thinking, I wish I could get my hands on some pre-made NGSS aligned materials that I can use in my classroom, like these guest speakers have tonight, we have good news. Angela already spilled the beans for you that it is on the Food and Ag Center for Science Education. It has resources like what you've seen and what you've seen tonight. We like to call it the center, and it's available to you at no cost for teachers who want to put agriculture into their classroom. And they're going to be NGSS aligned, NGSS materials that you can download and, like Cassidy did, personalize it for your students to make more sense. So I'm going to give you some time to go look at this, look around, because I know that all of you are in different areas. You teach different levels. You have different goals for your students. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to go to the center website, which Angela has put into the chat, or you can QR code it. And I want you to be specifically looking at resources that make you say, I want this. I think my students would love this next school year, or even maybe it's something you could do the last couple of weeks of school if you're still in school. I know some people, it was last day of school in Texas today. Maryland, we got a month left, right? So like, is it something you could use in the last couple of weeks? There's STEM challenges on there. There's lessons. There's a transfer task, 2 more weeks up in Chicago. So go ahead, take 10 minutes to look on the website and try and find something that you personally can use and that it gets you excited. I'm going to start the timer. You're going to be individually looking for them. We're going to go on mute. If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat.
Mommy, you expect me to get in there?
We have about a minute left to explore. Be ready to share one that you'd like to use in your class. All right, take a second to go into the chat and share what's the one resource or two resources that really stood out to you that you're excited about using. Heard a lot of different ones you shared throughout. Let's see. I heard the cheese making one. That's an awesome one. What else? The genetics transfer task. What else did we see on there? So the mini aquaponics unit, the mini aquaponics lesson was one. What else did you guys see on there? Extreme heat educator guide. We're having to get a shade cloth for our gardens in South Florida. Yeah, very relevant. Rain barrels. Rain barrels are something else that you can probably get through a grant or from somebody. Another good thing to add to your school.
Rain barrels too is a really good one, Sarah, to bring down if you're teaching at a lower grade level. It's super easy to adapt that one, just because there's lots going on with that one. Real quick about the phenomenon toolkit that I was talking back and forth in the chat about. Those are just little starters of like potential phenomena that are a phenomena is again something that's observable, something that's going to spark student curiosity, and then something that you can relate to a specific context like a DCI or a standard. And so yeah, it's a little wonky, the document, but it does have some really good stuff in there. So it's worth taking a peek at, but those you actually have to turn into lessons on your own. But we give you a head start at least for that.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Awesome. Well, tonight I hope you were able to find at least one resource that you could use in your classroom. But before we depart, I just want to remind you about what you kind of reviewed tonight. You did the starter toolkits with Cassidy, the Washington State Soil Toolkit, which is on the center website that you guys can download and use if you really like that topography and the maps and figuring out food webs to use as an investigative phenomena or even an anchor or transfer task. You could use that as an assessment for your students. You also learned about that transfer task from Angela, like how are they making sense of NGSS through a new phenomena, which is that was that video that we watched, which was so powerful, right? That image that you saw of the rain, and it was only after 10 minutes, and how different those soils, how they reacted to that water. And then you got to learn about the center. I'm so excited that you guys are excited about the great resources on there. And you're like, hey, I really think I could use this in the classroom. That's exactly what we want to hear. Angela and I were just on a meeting today about what we can do next year for y'all. So if you have any suggestions, make sure you put in the survey. We'll talk about in just a second, like what would you love? And we'll make sure that we transfer that on to them. It has been a great night. It's almost been 90 minutes diving into learning about how to implement NGSS into your classroom and hearing from real classroom teachers who have done these things in their classrooms, because I know as an educator, you want to know that it's proven before you take it to your students, because you want to make sure it's good, because you would not be here if you're on the East Coast, 8:30 at night, learning to help your students. And kudos to you for being here. That really means a lot to us and people who have kids in the school and educators. Like, that's a lot of willingness to be able to go out and do these things that nobody's telling you to do. Thanks for working collaboratively. You guys did such a great job in the breakout rooms. And to wrap up, I have 2 tasks for you. One, I want you to throw into the chat your biggest takeaway from tonight. It could be as simple as an aha moment, a term you learned, somebody you met, a link that you liked. Go ahead and just take 1 minute to get out there. Leslie shouted out Wendy from Wyoming. People talked about some Purple Plow stuff that they liked from the center. What else stood out to you tonight? All of the links. Thank you. You're welcome. We will continue giving you those takeaway documents so you can easily get them in one place. Great material. Networked with a monarch garden pollinator and found a good lesson plan for aquaponics, trained for tasks, practical assessment tools, just using NGSS better in your class, great resources to adapt to Texas standards. The takeaway doc was nice to keep notes on. Deanna loved talking with Elizabeth from Maryland. The 5 E's, yes, the 5 E's, measurable, actionable statements, all incredible takeaways. Tonight's learning experience was funded by the Beef Farmers and Ranchers. We thank them for their continued support. And lastly, we'd love for you to take a moment to answer this short survey before you leave. A few of you have asked about CEUs and getting the recording and all that kind of stuff. When you fill out the survey, that collects your email address, so we're able to contact you after this, and you can get all that resources. Your feedback is super valuable. This is our 2nd webinar of an 8-webinar series, and we've already made changes from webinar 1 to webinar 2 to make it better. And I already have notes from tonight to make webinar 3 even better. And speaking of webinar 3, it is happening on June 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So get out your calendars, write it down, June 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is called Start Seeing in 3D, Discover NGSS 3 Dimensions in Agriculture Phenomena. So if you want to dive deeper into the 3 dimensions, and you want to dive deeper into phenomena and what that looks like, come on June 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Beth, the first webinar, I think it's in process of getting put up, or it is put up, and we will make sure you get access to that. It'll all be on a site, the same site. Angela, do you have anything else? You're muted.
I always do that, guys. It's actually going to be on the Farm STEM website. I'll drop a link in the chat to that. But you would click under events, and then everything that we've done so far, even like previous years when we've had other speakers in, all of that is under events and then archived resources or archived events. So you can check everything out there. But yeah, so I don't know if the first one's on there yet. It takes a little time for the editing and all that. So
awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time and all of your work and sharing with everyone. Thanks for being so participatory throughout the whole night. And we look forward to connecting with you on June 8th at 7 p.m.